Hi, my name is Jay Sugarman, and I want to welcome you to Museum Open House. This ongoing series features and highlights many of the outstanding museums and other cultural institutions. The main purpose of most programs is to inform viewers about current and upcoming exhibits, various programs, resources, and other opportunities that are available for the general public. Today, via Zoom, we're fortunate to have as our guests Jessica Burko, Nicholas Gaffney, Lei Han, Joetta Maue, and Bruce Myren, all of whom are associated with Exposure 2023, the 27th annual Photographic Resource Center Juried Members Exhibition, which is on view until September 17th at the VanDernoot Gallery at Lesley College. Jessica serves as the creative director of the Photographic Resource Center, and Nicholas, Lei, and Joetta Bruce are four of the highly accomplished photographers whose artwork is being featured. During the program, we'll find out why and how Exposure 2023 came about. We'll go on a behind-the-scenes tour, and in the process, come to better understand and appreciate the talents of our guests and the wide range of programs, events, and other opportunities offered by the Photographic Resource Center. Let's start by meeting our guests and then finding out all about Exposure 2023. Welcome. So delighted you're all able to be here. I'm
Thank you.
Very eager to hear all about your work, what's available at the exhibition, have you inform viewers. But before we jump right to that, Jessica, would you please start by just sharing a little bit of the history, perhaps the mission of the Photographic Resource Center?
Absolutely. Jay, really, first, thank you so much for having us here. We really appreciate it. So the PRC actually started about 50 years ago as a newsletter, and it was a newsletter announcing opportunities for photographers and also exhibitions, which was unusual at the time. It was hard to find at that time information about photography. And over the years, the newsletter turned into a group and a larger group. And we are a member-driven group. We have memberships. And our purpose is much like it was originally. Our purpose is to support photographers, to provide opportunities, and to educate the wider public about what is happening in the local photography community and encourage people to get involved.
Mm-hmm. Before we enjoy some of the work from the photographers, would you just give a little background about how Exposure 2023 came about?
Yes, it's, as you say, it's a long-running annual exhibition, and it is a members exhibition. So we encourage our membership from all over the country and even international members to apply to the show. And every year we have a guest curator for the exhibition. The curator this year is Shayna Lopes, and she's from the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. She's a photography curator there. And we try to have jurors from various locations and different types of avenues in the photography industry, such as museums and galleries and publications. And so it's up to the juror to build the show, to select the show, and then we get to host it. And it's always a really wonderful experience, and it brings new photographers to the local audience from elsewhere. And today, all of our photographers who are here today are New England photographers.
Nice, nice. Well, we're looking forward to seeing and enjoying some of the work. And let's continue by doing that. And like to welcome you, Nicholas. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
would you start, please, before we hear about one of your pieces here, just sharing a little bit about your background and how you developed an interest in photography?
Yeah, I've been taking pictures since I was an undergraduate at NYU, and kind of discovered photography at a photography class I took kind of at random when I was an undergraduate in college, and really liked how I liked the freedom that it gave me. First, I liked the freedom of being in the dark room and kind of taking pictures and developing them. I've since kind of moved to almost exclusively digital, but I still really enjoy the freedom I get from being able to wander around with the camera and be able to kind of look for things to photograph, kind of with a certain amount of intention, but also with a certain freedom in that I don't quite know what I'm going to find until I find it. So there's a little bit of excitement in the discovery of finding something that I wasn't expecting to see, but also in the editing process and kind of in photographing things that I'm excited by, and then going later on and looking at the images and figuring out which ones might work together to form a series of photographs that speaks in some way, work together as an image, as images, but sort of speak a little bit to my own personal life, but also just to kind of describing and interpreting the world around me.
How did the couple of examples that we're about to see come about?
So all of these photos were taken in the summer of 2021. I specifically kind of chose to photograph in black and white, which I hadn't been photographing in a while. COVID was still with us then, and I'm fortunate. I live in New Hampshire, and I'm fortunate to live in a place where it's fairly easy to be outside. And I think at that point in the world, there was a lot of intentional outdoorsiness happening, I guess. My family and I spent a lot of time outside, kind of wandering around, and I knew I wanted to be photographing. I didn't quite know what or how to be photographing. I chose to photograph in black and white because maybe that was just sort of the mood I was in at that particular moment. But the two photographs you're going to show are both examples, I think, good examples of having my camera with me and not really expecting to find what I found, but then being very excited by kind of what I found. In the first case, it was an early morning, kind of walking along a path and happening upon accidentally wandering in without meaning to, kind of half wandering into someone's backyard without really meaning to, and discovering a hammock and quickly photographing the hammock and then moving on because I didn't want to linger in someone else's backyard for too long. But it really kind of struck me the sort of the I hate to put a lot of real emotional quality onto photographs to a certain extent, but there's a sort of a sadness to this image that I found kind of moving, with the trees kind of framing this kind of old hammock. It almost looked like a sail on a boat, and I think I only took one, maybe two photographs of it, but this really worked for me as an image. And again, it was one of those images that I knew fairly quickly that it was you don't always quite know when you're going to take a photograph if it's going to be the one that's going to work out or be the one that you're excited to buy later on. But this was an example of one that I was pretty excited to buy even after I'd photographed it.
Wonderful, wonderful. How about the second piece we have here?
The second image, again, is a little bit more of a, in terms of a composition, it was a little bit more of an experiment. Again, I spent a lot of time outside. I have two daughters, and we would go to the beach, and it was sort of a grayer day on the beach, and I wasn't, for some reason, in the mood to go swimming, so I kind of wandered around the beach a little bit, and someone had drawn this S-shaped line on the beach, and I really liked seeing kind of how that contrasted against the V shape in kind of the reflection of the landscape, as well as the line that you can see by the kind kind of this fenced in area, exactly, but lined in area, swim area. This is an example of a photograph that I took quickly without really thinking too much about it, beyond the fact that I liked the composition. I just sort of described it, but in my head I'm just, oh, that's an interesting, that plus that plus that can make an interesting image. And so I photographed it and moved on, and it wasn't until I kind of forgot about this particular photograph until I went to look at my photos later and really kind of like the way everything kind of came together in a particular way, but also, I don't know, there's something a little bit quiet about the photograph. There's something sort of kind of interesting about the different kind of compositional shapes that happen, but I also like, I kind of, beyond the composition, there's something sort of quiet and contemplative about the photograph that, I don't know, in the summer of 2021, there was a lot of, we all kind of felt, I think, the need to get out and kind of thinking, is COVID going, when is COVID going to be over? And it's still not really over right now. But at that point, there was a mood that I think a lot of people were in. And I think the photographs, these two photographs and the others in the series, I think to a certain extent, I was kind of going for a particular,
No, I
maybe
think we
sort
can
of
all,
in a way trying to describe the mood that my head was in without really quite knowing how to do that until I found the photographs that I decided to photograph.
I think we can all remember back that time, and you indeed captured it. I know we could hear much more, but we're going to move on. And Lei, would you please share a little bit about how you became interested in the type of photography you take now?
Okay. It was a long story. I studied computer graphics and animation long times ago, and I work in Hollywood in DreamWorks for decades. I mean, on those like animation film. Mostly, I was a computer lighting artist, mostly doing those image generation. Well. For photography, it related to the PRC actually. Exactly 10 years ago, in 2013, I took a photography course in Photographic Resource Center. At that time, PRC located in BU at that time. So I took a course, a social documentary photography class taught by Glenn Ruga. It kind of opened eyes for me, like about possibility to photography can like not only express myself, but have some influence for socially. And well, for a long time, the work in the film industry, I have well-trained aesthetic eye to do the lighting and the composition, those things. But I eventually find out photography is more than that. So I spend more and more time on those.
You know, building on that, would you share a little bit about your contribution, Shanghai 2022, and what we're seeing here, please?
Okay, in April 2022, I back to Shanghai to visit my family because I have been like the flight, all those canceled between US and China, so for 2 years almost, so I cannot go back to see my parents. And so after a long and tedious waiting, finally I got a like kind of visa to go back to China. But that's the week Shanghai, the whole city start to lock down. So when I land in Shanghai, the whole city locked, and I was locked in the hotel for more than 2 months. Well, glad I have my camera, so at least taking photos through the window is my only thing to do for that 2 months, like almost, yeah.
And
So
what are we seeing in
my
this
wife
shot?
and my daughter, yeah, so outside of the window is the one of the main road in Shanghai Pudong, and the whole city is empty. There's nothing outside, and it's raining. And my wife and my daughter was looking through the window. That's the only way we can see the world. Even we cannot go the door of our room, actually. So I kind of feel, yeah, that's the feeling of. That's pretty
Oh, I think
straightforward for me.
you definitely conveyed that very well. And how about the second image here?
So this thing is a little bit hard to read for people not live in those area, because this kind of green barrier, that thing is the government use that to lock the whole compound resident facility. So, and the sheet is kind of I think somebody tried to install it to kind of show the protest for the lockdown. So that kind of a setup for the very typical the compound, how they lock the compound. I mean, people cannot go out, and even though you don't have food, you cannot go out. And that time, after a few years, no, after a few months, actually, they use this thing in Xinjiang to lock the whole resident compound, and there's a fire start, and even the fire truck cannot get in, so there's a lot of people dying in that resident facility. Yeah,
Fascinating to hear about. I know there's much more, but for the sake of time, we're going to move on.
okay.
And want to welcome Joetta
Hi,
and
thanks for having
ask
me.
you to start by just sharing the range of your interests, artistic interests.
Yeah, I actually started as a photographer, so that's where my initial training is. I fell in love with photography in high school, and I still never get over seeing a silver halide print develop in a bath of chemicals. It's like magic that we can capture light in that way. And I studied photography in both my MFA and my BFA, but both of my programs were quite interdisciplinary. So I was exposed to a lot of different practices and required to do them in undergrad, begrudgingly, and graduate school very happily. And so I don't really consider myself a photographer. I consider myself an artist more generally. And my practices involve photography, hand embroidery, and highly rendered sort of somewhat abstract drawings in either pencil or ink. And that's what you're seeing in this installation, as a combination of those three mediums.
Yeah, very much so. Could you share a little bit more about the range of examples that we have on the screen now?
Yeah, so I started as a photographer, as I said, but I ended up because I was a large format color photographer, and that was back in C printing days. When I graduated from undergrad, where I had access to a 40-inch C printer and a whole bunch of large format cameras, it was pretty traumatic to figure out, how do I continue making work? And so at that point, I started to explore mediums that were more accessible without that equipment. And I actually did printmaking for a number of years, because there's a number of processes where you can use a photograph and transfer it or translate it into a piece of paper. And that's the work that I was making when I went to graduate school. In graduate school, I had access to a beautiful 40-inch printer again. So I started actively working on my color photography, but during my time there, I ended up starting to embroider. I was taking a class at the time that was about process, and I was also making work about healing, and I liked the conceptual idea of embroidery as a metaphor. That work really took off and was primarily what I made for the next 8 to 10 years and what I'm most well known for. But there was a point where the labor of embroidery didn't quite make sense because the content of my work had really shifted to things that are much more ephemeral and transcendent. And so I started to really return to my photographic practice and also started to incorporate drawings because even though my drawings do take forever, they're much more immediate than the embroidery works. And I kind of like the contrast between the immediacy of a photograph and the very labor-intensive practices that I do.
In time we have left to hear a little more thoughts, could you share a background of this piece here, some of the highlights and what you hope to achieve and have viewers appreciate?
Yeah, so I think the earliest piece in this is actually the little drawing on the bottom. That's a graphite drawing on a watercolor sort of wash. And this was at the beginning of what is now a pretty long-term series where I've been drawing dust from cameraless photographs. So I collect the sweepings of my house, I translate them into a cameraless image, and then sometimes I also translate them into a drawing. And I'm really fascinated with dust because it's like this detritus of our everyday. It's something we sort of discard and hide, but it also is the literal evidence of the bodies and lives that are living within a space. So there's also something really powerful and beautiful about it to me. And so the drawing was sort of an experiment of this process. And what I ended up finding when I started to translate these collections of dust into cameraless photographs is how when you remove space, they become very like cosmos-like. So I started to do a lot of research and have a lot of interest in images of the cosmos. So the image on the right, the drawing or watercolor painting on the right is of a star form. I don't remember which one off the top of my head. And so it's directly translating a photograph of the cosmos. And I'm really interested in how this tiny particle of human and animals can relate to something that is so vast and big that we can't even comprehend it. But my work also has a lot to do with domesticity and intimacy. And so I've used the bed as a sort of landscape. And again, I'm really attracted to how when I photograph the bed in a certain way, it is obviously in bed and sheeting in this everyday ordinary space, but it can also speak to a really grand sort of landscape and something much greater than the place we lay down every day.
Now, as was the case with Nicholas and Lei, so helpful for you to provide this background really allows us to appreciate your work even more. Thank you very much. Bruce, welcome. Would you just start before we enjoy a couple of your pieces, a little bit how you developed your interest in photography and what your focus is these days?
So I started back when I was in, I think I was 9 when I took my first photo class, and I fell in love with the image coming up in the tray, and that was just so magical to me. So I ended up got my BFA in photography, my MFA in photography, and I work in long-term projects. So my projects tend to be documentary in style in some ways, and they go on for a number of years. So this particular project is called Return of the Elms, which is street trees and private trees, elm trees in Cambridge and Boston. And I just got interested in them from another project. I'll be making pictures in one project and then come across another element of that project, and it becomes a new project. So that's kind of how this came about, by photographing the Washington elm on Cambridge Common since 2014. I started to branch out and photograph these street trees and the care and maintenance of them around Cambridge and Boston. So basically the return of elms, elms being reintroduced into the urban environment.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the things you take in consideration when shaping, say, this photograph here?
Well, this I wanted to show the kind of the struggle of the tree between the two buildings, even though it's not really between the two buildings, it's actually in front of the one on the left and beside the one on the right. But I wanted to give it that sense of its struggle to get light up between the buildings. But I also wanted to show that it was in an urban environment. So the street is important, the car is important for that reason.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the second piece, we have some background information of this one.
Yeah, sure. The second one, which I can't remember which one is the second one. Is it the it's the tree on the Cambridge Common.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that one. So that's one of the new trees. That Cambridge plants about 100 new elms every year, and along with a lot of other cities and towns around the area. So this is a new elm that was planted on Cambridge Common. So to show the kind of the lifespan and to show the, that in some ways the struggle for the new tree, that we have to support it so much. It's got poles and lines holding in place and water bags to water it. So again, it's about, in some ways it's about the struggle of life, or life trying to take hold.
In closing, before we move on, what do you hope to achieve with your work?
Well, for me, I'm hoping that I'd like that people could get a better sense of their own community and their own urban environment, and how trees are important to life on the planet, and that it starts right here in your neighborhood. It's not some exotic place far away, but it's right in your home ground.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing, and we're going to move on in closing back to you, Jessica. Before we hear a little bit about current and upcoming programs at the Resource Center, would you share what some of the feedback and reaction has been to Exposure 2023 so far?
Sure, it's been very positive. We've had a large number of visitors to the gallery, and we've had some great media exposure here, and also through a review in the Boston Globe and in the online photography magazine called What Will You Remember? And really, when people come into the gallery, they become very engaged in the work, and they want to talk about the work and the process and how it makes them feel. And for me, that makes a successful show right there.
And I know what we saw today is just a sample of many other wonderful contributions as well.
Mm-hmm.
In the minute or so we have left, would you highlight any other current or upcoming programs and events for us to be aware of, please?
Absolutely. As you mentioned, Exposure is open through September 17th. The hours are Friday through Sunday from 12 to 6. And we really hope people can stop by and check it out. We also have 2 other events happening this month. On September 12th, so next week, we have Victoria Sambonaris is giving a presentation as part of the PRC speaker series. And she makes work of landscapes that have been altered by human activity. And so that will be on September 12th at 6:30. It is hybrid. So all that information is on our website about how to buy tickets and attend. And then on September 27th, we are super excited to have an event in conjunction with the Somerville Toy Camera Festival, of which Bruce is actually one of the organizers. And we are having an event that night that's part of our monthly series called PRC Nights. And this will be held in person at the Washington Street Gallery in Somerville. And Bruce actually will be hosting the evening, and we have 4 photographers presenting their work who are exhibiting in exhibitions that are part of the festival. So we always have a lot going on, really exciting programs. And all the information is on our website. So we would love it if people could
Terrific,
check that out.
terrific. Yeah, definitely lots to look forward to. And in addition to the Resource Center's website, we'll have contact information for Nicholas, Lei, Joetta, and Bruce as well. But unfortunately, we've come to the end of the program. There's so much more I know we could hear about each of you as individuals and what's on the exhibition, but we're going to move on. Thank you and continued success with all future endeavors.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
Jay. Thank you, Jessica.
Also want to thank those of you watching for joining us and hope you'll be able to tune in next time.